In 2025, 1 in 5 people live in a real democracy. The rest? Well, that's another story. We're ranking the most ruthless and sometimes bizarre regimes that are still standing today. And don't forget, if you like these weekly map dives, hit that subscribe button because, well, my student loans refuse to accept likes as payment. Starting us off with number 15, the Neo-Sultan. We begin our tour in Turkey, the odd man out of NATO. You'd think that the alliance sets the standard when it comes to protecting democracy, but its second largest military seems to have skimmed that part of the rulebook. On the VDEM think tank's Liberal Democracy Index, Turkey comes in at 139th in the world, below countries usually scolded with a firm, "We're not angry, just disappointed." Turkey's been moonwalking out of democracy for 20 years, and the man leading the dance? Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's been president since 2014. Before that, prime minister since 2003. He's the most influential leader since Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the republic's founder. But influence is a double-edged sword. Useful in battle, not so much when you're the one holding the pointy end. On July 10th, 2020, history was reversed. The Hagia Sophia went from a museum back to a mosque. That one move symbolized Turkey's transformation. Kemal wanted a secular, modern nation-state. Erdogan took that as a personal diss. Kemal saw himself as a Western-style leader. Erdogan sees himself as a cosplay sultan. He's fanboying so hard he threatened the United States with an Ottoman slap. That was over American support for the Kurds. Washington laughed it off. The Turkish people weren't so lucky. Erdogan is one of 2 leaders in this video with a prison record. He was sentenced to 10 months and stripped of his office as mayor of Istanbul because he recited a poem that the court said was an incitement of religious hatred. And you thought poetry slams were painful. He served just 4 months before being released, and the ban on his entry into the Turkish parliament was lifted. A lot of people wish it hadn't been. Once Erdogan changed Turkey's system from a parliamentary to a presidential one in 2014, he began ruling with an iron fist. One by one, he shut down opposition groups working against the state and independent media. Which, as everyone knows, is exactly what you do when you've got nothing to hide. A coup attempt in July 2016 only fueled the fire. Over 200 journalists were rounded up and 120 publications were closed. 4 years later, he put the screws on social media companies, not because of a coup, but because their users insulted his finance minister's wife, who also happens to be Erdogan's daughter. It's a system that conveniently helps him jail people who compare him to Gollum from Lord of the Rings. But the Kurdish minority has gotten the brunt of Erdogan's rage. Almost 3,000 Kurdish political leaders have been jailed, and he's taken his campaign across borders. The Turkish military has occupied parts of northern Syria, where horrors followed. Erdogan's been accused of trying to remake the border, driving Kurds out in a campaign of ethnic cleansing. Reports indicate that when they're not being driven out, local women are being abused, kidnapped, forced into marriage, or murdered. Erdogan probably won't face any fallout for this. He made it illegal for the Grand National Assembly to investigate him. Erdogan says he's finally going to retire in May 2028, though if he does, it will almost certainly be on his own terms. Turkish insiders think his son-in-law, Selçuk Bayraktar, the godfather of Turkey's drone fleet, as a leading candidate. Suddenly, Hollywood's Nepo babies don't look so bad. Whoever takes charge, they're not likely to restore the institutions Erdogan gutted. And if Turkey looks shaky, Iran takes it a step further. Number 14, the Islamic Republic. Unlike Turkey, Iran was never a true democracy. It has elections, but they're more make-believe than meaningful. And this is why it's 147th on VDEM's list. So how do the elections work? Well, every political candidate has to be vetted from the unelected Guardian Council, an exclusive boys' club of Islamic legal experts. Half of its 12 members are handpicked by the supreme leader. The other half? The legislature selects them from nominees put forward by the Chief Justice, who is chosen by the supreme leader. The council can then veto laws or even supervise elections. Unsurprisingly, reforms rarely make it past the concept stage. The one thing the council can't veto is the supreme leader himself, the only figure it ultimately answers to. The supreme leader can pretty much do whatever he wants once he's appointed by another body, the Assembly of Experts. Technically, the public elects this body every 8 years, but there are catches. They all have to be experts in Islamic jurisprudence. Nobody else should bother applying. And just to keep things tidy, all candidates must first be approved by the Guardian Council. All roads lead back to the supreme leader. That's currently this man, Ali Khamenei, who's been there longer than many of the people watching this video have been alive. He took control in 1989 and will stay there until he dies or retires. Khamenei presides over a theocratic regime that dishes out brutal sentences for crimes. The US State Department has a lot to say about it, though Iran usually just shrugs and says, "Watch this." If you're in Iran, having illegitimate relations with a woman who is not a relative can see you on the end of hundreds of lashings. Distribute unapproved music? 3 years in prison. All music, lyrics, and album covers must be approved by the Ministry of Culture to ensure Islamic moral values. Even Iran's own history can only be celebrated on official terms. This is the homeland of Cyrus the Great, founder of Persian civilization. But in October 2016, dozens of students were arrested for using norm-breaking and anti-values slogans at a birthday event in his honor. Some of them were sentenced to 8 years. Gender equality, forget it. Khamenei says it's a plot to corrupt the role of women in society. But at least he seems to practice what he preaches. Sure, he controlled assets worth $95 billion in 2013, but it's not like he's splurging. Instead, he's known for living a frugal lifestyle. Other leaders on this list don't even bother with the illusion. Number 13. The world's coolest dictatorship. 10 years ago, El Salvador was the murder capital of the world, with 103 homicides per 100,000 people. In 2024, it's the safest country in the Americas with 1.9. Way to go, El Sal! This comeback story rests on one man, President Nayib Bukele, aka the Philosopher King, aka the world's coolest dictator. Seriously, that's what he calls himself, supposedly to mock his critics. And he's got a lot of them. Making El Salvador safe came at a high cost. It's why Bukele is one of the 2 most controversial people on this list. El Salvador's enormous gang problem was Bukele's top priority when he first got elected in 2019. The results of his first few years were mixed. The homicide rate dropped from 36 to 7.8, which is pretty impressive, but there were reports that the president brokered a deal with the gangs to make that happen. That publication, El Faro, was promptly accused of money laundering and had to move to Costa Rica. It was a sign of things to come. Then came March 25th to 27th, 2022, the deadliest period in El Salvador's history since the Civil War. The gangs killed 62 people. Bukele responded mercilessly. He passed a state of exception to El Salvador's constitution. It suspended certain rights, including freedom of assembly, communications privacy, and time limits to detention. It was supposed to last 30 days. It's still going. Anti-gang measures followed. Bukele built enormous prisons, swept up anyone that even remotely looked like a gang member, and threw them in there without trial. El Salvador now imprisons more people per capita than any other country, with almost 1,700 prisoners per 100,000 people. Reports of abuse are rampant. The screams are supposedly constant as guards hit people day and night. Meanwhile, Bukele smiles for the cameras as El Salvador plays host to the likes of the Miss Universe pageant and the ISA World Surfing Games. But behind the tiaras and sashes, the walls keep closing in. Freedoms of movement and speech have shrunk, almost as fast as gang territories. Dissent means arrest. Critics face endless surveillance. Whole neighborhoods are like open-air prisons. In a country the size of Massachusetts, there's nowhere to hide. And Bukele has only tightened his grip since then. With his Nuevas Ideas party supermajority, the constitutional guardrails disappeared. Back-to-back terms once looked impossible, but not for Bukele. In late July 2025, they let him run again, and again, and again. Bukele remains highly popular in El Salvador. His re-election in 2024 by over 84% was considered free and fair, unlike so many others in this video. More than anyone else on this list, he lives up to his nicknames. But we've seen this story before. It's why El Salvador has sunk to 148 on VDEM's index, below even Iran. Opposition has been effectively flattened. Now Salvadorans can only hope Bukele turns out more like Singapore's Lee Kuan Yew and less like, say, the world's most infamous modern war criminal. Number 12. The modern Tsardom. Is anyone really surprised at this entry? Vladimir Putin has been the president or prime minister of Russia since 1999, longer than any Moscow leader since Joseph Stalin. In that time, the Russian Federation has slid to 159th on VDEM's list, and thanks to a new law, he could stay there until 2036. Don't be surprised if that changes, assuming he's still alive and kicking by then. Putin maintains his title as president of Russia with the help of elaborate stage-managed elections. Unlike some leaders on this list, he actually allows plenty of political parties. He even encourages them. The trick is that their competition splits the opposition vote. That leaves his United Russia party to dominate. And just in case, most of those parties have ties to him anyway, hidden somewhere in the fine print. Human rights issues in Russia are well known, so you might be more interested to hear about some of the more quirky things Putin does. He's created a cult of personality with feats of strength. He practices judo on camera and wrote a book about it. He's even got a black belt in it too. He once scuba dove and discovered 2 ancient Greek urns. He sedated an Amur tiger in the woods. He flew alongside endangered Siberian white cranes in a hang glider, guiding them to safety. He dove in a mini-sub off occupied Crimea to explore a shipwreck from the Byzantine Empire. Is all this true? Who knows? The judo, the urns, the tiger, the cranes may be real, maybe not, but I really hope the bird part at least is legit. But if you want more on Russia, check out my recent videos. No tigers or crane cameos though, promise. Now back to democracy, or at least what's left of it. Number 11. Mafia state. So far, Turkey's noped its way out of democracy, Iran's perfected the art of fake elections, and El Salvador's turned the whole country into a holding cell. Next up, a country where dictatorship is the family business. At number 161 on VDEM's list, the Republic of Azerbaijan has been run by President Ilham Aliyev since 2003. Before him, it was his father. In Baku, democracy isn't passed down. It's the presidency that is. Just look at Nagorno-Karabakh to see what he's all about. Ethnic Armenians had been living there for centuries. Today, there's very few. Over 100,000 of them rushed for the exits in the autumn of 2023, when Aliyev's forces came. Only a few dozen had the courage to remain. International human rights groups have described it as an ethnic cleansing. He might even have his eyes on Armenia itself. Aliyev said that the nation was only a territory artificially created on ancient Azerbaijani lands. Armenians in Azerbaijani territory have had it the worst, but no one really escapes. Azerbaijan's Shia Muslims live under constant surveillance, and since his victory in 2023, Aliyev has gotten worse. He's swept up opposition journalists and activists in a wave of arbitrary arrests. He says it's a way to prevent foreign influence in Azerbaijan. In reality, it's just his way of reminding everyone who signs their paychecks and who doesn't. Elections here are a sham. Aliyev used his victory in Nagorno-Karabakh to call for an early vote last year. Opposition parties said they wouldn't participate and urged voters to stay home. All critical voices to his regime had to stay silent. He won by over 92%. So what does Aliyev do with all this power? Well, he was the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project's 2012 Person of the Year. Apparently, there really is an award for everything. But that about sums it up. He's a mafia boss masquerading as a president. In 2017, word got out that he was at the center of a $2.9 billion money laundering scheme. The funds went through 4 UK companies. The people that got the money spent it on luxury goods and private schools for their children. And it worked. A critical vote from the Council of Europe on Azerbaijan's human rights record was successfully avoided. Azerbaijan's president seems fond of the UK. When the Pandora Papers came out in 2021, they showed that his 3 children and 2 close associates were involved in a sprawling network of 84 offshore companies. They owned London properties worth $700 million, and he and his family have stakes in most of the country's important industries. For them, Azerbaijan is a business. With European demand for energy sources outside Russia, they're likely about to get even richer. Number 10. The $15 million man. Aliyev might be a presidential don, but he doesn't have a $15 million bounty on his head. This one does. Welcome to Nicolas Maduro's Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, ranked 168th on VDEM's list. Like many stories of non-democratic countries, this one also begins with an election. Venezuela was in chaos in the 1980s and 1990s. So, Hugo Chavez was elected as president of Venezuela in 1998 and began the Bolivarian Revolution. The country soon became dominated by a single party, the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. Chavez died in office in 2013. During his tenure, Venezuela went from being one of the richest countries in Latin America to one of the poorest. That's continued under his successor. Under Maduro, ordinary Venezuelans have gotten a lot poorer. Just 3 years into his rule, almost 16% of them were resorting to eating food waste. Meanwhile, Maduro is probably living big off of narcotics trafficking. 2 of his wife's nephews have been convicted of bringing cocaine into the United States. That was in 2016. 4 years later, Maduro himself was indicted for conspiring with Colombia's FARC militants. Basically, he's accused of letting a designated terror group traffic narcotics into the United States through Venezuelan airspace. So there's a $15 million reward for his arrest. Maduro can do that because he stays in power through brazen force. The Carter Center was monitoring Venezuela's 2024 election. Surprisingly, there were little reports about intimidation at polling places to pressure voters like in Egypt. The Maduro regime's censorship and restrictions on political activity left the election's legitimacy in doubt, long before the National Election Council decided not to bother with results by polling stations. In the end, the regime just announced Maduro as the winner. Deal with it. Maduro certainly did. He followed up with Operation Tuntun to crack down on dissent that popped up in the aftermath, a name that sounds friendlier than the crackdown it delivered. His opponents had to flee to the Dutch and Spanish embassies to apply for asylum and is now living in exile in Spain. Whoever has the bravery to challenge Maduro again in 2030 probably should make similar plans. Number 9. The Motherland of Neutrality. Welcome to the delightfully named Motherland of Neutrality, Turkmenistan, ranked 174th on the Liberal Democracy Index. It gained independence from Soviet rule in 1991, but not from Soviet leaders. Saparmurat Niyazov, the communist bigwig at the time, took over and implemented a personality cult more elaborate than anything on this list so far. He was called the father of all Turkmen. He put up golden statues of himself as the economy struggled. He renamed cities after himself and his family members. He renamed the months of the year. He closed libraries because he said the average Turkmen don't read. Doctors in the country swore loyalty to him rather than the Hippocratic Oath, even as he closed all the hospitals outside the capital. Then he died in 2006. He didn't become an eternal president, though. The current president is Serdar Berdimuhamedov, who took power in 2022. Took power are the key words here. His predecessor was his father, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, who took over after Niyazov's death. When he said it was time for a younger leader, he simply pulled an Azerbaijan, handing the country straight to his son. The election he organized was a show of 9. His son and 8 other candidates loyal to him. The son won with 73% of the vote. There were no debates, and Serdar's few public appearances were all heavily scripted. A snap of the fingers, a few magic words, and presto, you have a president. But Berdimuhamedov, the father, wasn't going away. He was quickly appointed chairman of the People's Council of Turkmenistan, a body he created in 2021 by his grateful son. It can change the constitution and give out guidelines for domestic and foreign policy. It also helps that he is now officially the national leader of the Turkmen people, so he and his family have legal immunity. Basically, Turkmenistan is now a father-son co-regency. Maybe Lukashenko is taking notes. The dynasty has at least abolished some of the more eccentric parts of Knyazov's personality cult. The calendar was changed back, and libraries and hospitals were reopened, sure, but some golden statues of Knyazov were just replaced with Gurbangulis. Human rights and Turkmenistan don't go well together either. Baloch and Uzbek ethnic minorities are forbidden from teaching their language and customs. Religious minorities are accused of inciting hatred, imprisoned, and tortured. Internet access is heavily censored. For one thing, you can't watch this video if you're in Turkmenistan. Number 8. Modern Kingdom, Old Oppression. Most non-democratic countries at least try to look democratic. That's not so in Saudi Arabia, ranked 169th on VDEM's list. It's a throwback to what was supposed to be a bygone era, an absolute monarchy. The king, currently Salman, rules with complete authority. There is a prime minister of Saudi Arabia, but the PM is usually the king or crown prince. King Salman doesn't do the day-to-day business of governing the kingdom. He is 89 years old. He should be thinking about kicking back somewhere oppressive and full of sand, but enough about Florida. Salman has made a tremendously important decision for the kingdom's future. In 2017, he broke with tradition and appointed his son the crown prince. This man, Mohammed bin Salman, frequently just called MBS, has been the effective ruler of Saudi Arabia since then. In 2022, his role was formalized when he became PM, and he might just be the most controversial figure in this video. Putin and Maduro are like comic book bad guys. They're evil, and you know it. MBS is a more complex character. Shortly after taking over, he complained that if it hadn't been for America's influence, Saudi Arabia would have ended up like North Korea. And it's true that before him, Saudi Arabia was more like Afghanistan than America. Daily life was highly controlled by religious authorities that had enormous power. In one shocking incident back in 2002, they were accused of hindering rescue attempts during a fire at a girls' school because the girls weren't wearing abayas. 15 died. That has changed. MBS stripped the religious police of most of their powers. With them out of the picture, he opened up the entertainment and cultural sectors in Saudi Arabia. It's become almost a literal mecca for big sporting events. Men and women can go out together freely now. In just a decade, MBS has made Saudi Arabia look more like a modern Western-style country. But democracy? Not here. MBS leads a particularly brutal authoritarian regime. Jamal Khashoggi's was only the most infamous act. Things have worsened since. Critics are rounded up, tortured, and killed. Over 21,000 workers have died building his Vision 2030 program. MBS also hasn't completely done away with the guardianship system. Women's rights activists who want it gone have also been rounded up. MBS says he has to do it to implement his reforms. That's what they all say. I don't know about you, but to me, this one's pretty wild. Saudi Arabia's actually managed to get more authoritarian under MBS. Now, it's just dressed up for the 21st century instead of the Middle Ages. Does the upgrade make it better or worse? Drop your take in the comments. Number 7. Europe's last dictatorship. Alexander Lukashenko has been the president of the Republic of Belarus since 1994, the only free and fair election he ever took part in, and that's part of the reason it's ranked 172nd on the VDEM's list. Notice I said part. Lukashenko's efforts to rig the vote and suppress dissent got so bad in 2020 that the US, UK, and EU no longer recognize him as the legitimate Belarusian president. But he's still there. In January 2025, he won yet another 6-year term, this time without protests because exiled political opponents knew they would be too dangerous. Lukashenko was threatened once. In 1996, during his first term, he was impeached for violating the Belarusian constitution. His solution was simple. He rewrote it in a sham referendum. The presidency gained sweeping powers. Parliament turned into a hand-picked rubber stamp. The security forces silenced dissent, and the rest, as they say, is history. Europe's so-called last dictator once had mighty ambitions. Russia was in chaos in the 1990s, and Lukashenko was an early champion of unification. Russia's fledgling liberals got nervous that he'd make a play for the Kremlin, but Putin put the kibosh on that. That hasn't stopped the Belarusian president from cracking down on the Belarusian language itself. He dismisses it as second-rate. His preference? Russian, of course. Belarusians who speak it in public are asking to be seen as enemies of the regime. If they display cultural symbols like Belarus' red and white flag, they definitely will be. Today, only 25% of Belarusians speak their own language in daily life. Lukashenko once sold himself as a man of the Belarusian people, a humble farmer who represented a way out of the former communist establishment. He likes to keep that image by playing sports, especially ice hockey, even now at age 70. But when you're a 70-year-old dictator, you think about the future, and in Lukashenko's case, that future might be like Azerbaijan's. Lukashenko's third son, Nikolai, has been on important business with him since he was a little boy. He was raised solely by his father. It isn't even certain who his mother is, though it's been reported it's Lukashenko's personal doctor, Irina. Lukashenko denies the idea, since the constitution says the president needs to be at least 35. Nikolai is only 20 now, so Lukashenko would need to last to 85 by then. But who takes that seriously here? Number 6. Surveillance Central. The dictatorships we've looked at so far are so openly corrupt that you can almost laugh at them if you're in a safe place. That's not so in the People's Republic of China. There were once high hopes here, but when Xi Jinping became China's leader in 2012, they disappeared quickly. Xi goes by several wordy titles to describe his position. General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Chairman of the Central Military Commission, and President of China are the most important. Since his time in charge, he's turned China into the world's most sophisticated authoritarian state, which ranks it 173rd on VDEM's index. You know about the oppression of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, the Great Firewall that blocks off access to the foreign internet, and the social credit system, but there are other things less known, but arguably more chilling. Chinese citizens have much greater access to technology than their counterparts in other countries on this list, but that's the point. It lets the Communist Party know what they're thinking. Complain about a traffic ticket on WeChat, get locked up for 5 days, even if it's deleted. People smart enough to keep their feelings to themselves are still being watched. There are 370 security cameras in China per 1,000 people. The next closest place in the world? Indore, India. It has 62.5. And they're not just any security cameras. They're linked to a vast data network powered by artificial intelligence to aggregate facial recognition and even DNA information. One slip, and the cameras in China will know exactly who you are, down to your gait, your face, and probably your mood. What makes it chilling isn't just the precision, but the fact the same technology is sitting in democratic countries too. Their governments are already using it, only they insist it's for your convenience. It's ironic, because Xi himself was once a political prisoner. His father was purged during Mao's Cultural Revolution, and he wound up digging ditches for a while in a labor camp. So how does Xi make his decisions that affirm the system that once victimized him? Few people know. Although he's a highly public figure, his leadership style more closely resembles his counterpart in Afghanistan. Xi's speeches usually take place behind closed doors and don't get released for months. He's reportedly a micromanager, but with vague orders, which means lower-level figures get to take the fall if things go bad. And they have to keep coming back to him, which means power is centralized in himself. There is a similarity with a certain other dictatorship, though. Ordinary Chinese people can get in trouble for watching certain Hollywood films. Not him, though. He's a fan. Saving Private Ryan is reportedly one of his favorites. But hey, at least Xi hasn't spent millions China doesn't have on golden statues of himself. Yet. That's not the case in a landlocked country to the west. Number 5. Spousal privilege. One country stands out in the New World as particularly non-democratic. It's headed not by a father-son dynasty, but by a husband and wife partnership. It's the Republic of Nicaragua, ranked 175th on VDEM's list. Daniel Ortega first grabbed power as head of Nicaragua's ruling junta. He served as president from 1985 to 1990 until he lost in a rare, free, and fair election. He tried again in 96, lost. Tried again in 2001, lost. The third time in 2006, that was the charm. But not for democracy. Ortega was back, and he wasn't leaving. In 2011, he ran again, this time blocking international poll observers from key polling places. And he was just getting started. In 2014, his allies scrapped presidential term limits. He's been re-elected ever since. When protests erupted in 2018, he crushed them with violence. Observers from the Organization for American States were expelled, but not before they found that Ortega's enforcers were using rubber bullets and tear gas. Then they moved to military-grade assault rifles and even grenade launchers. Doctors who treated the wounded were fired, leaving the true casualty count unknown. In 2021, Ortega followed the crackdown by arresting dozens of opposition leaders. There was an election that year. He won with 76% of the vote. His rule now feels like something out of Roman times. Even the Catholic Church isn't safe. Bishop Rolando Jose Alvarez Lagos of Matagalpa was put under house arrest. He was eventually exiled to Vatican City. Others haven't been so lucky. But Ortega is getting old. He'll be 80 in a few months. Succession is on the table. He's got 8 children to choose from, but one daughter accused him of abuse in a documentary, so trusting the family isn't exactly his strong suit. Instead, he made his wife, Rosario Murillo, co-president. She's already been vice president since 2017, so it was less a surprise and more a coronation. Time will tell if Nicaragua emerges from the dictatorship when Ortega finally gives up the ghost, but for now, it's the least democratic country in the Americas, even more than Venezuela. And Ortega's not alone. There are plenty more names coming. Some you've heard of, some you probably haven't. Stick around, because the worst of the worst is still to come. Number 4. The Emir of Mystery. No country has had more democratic backsliding in such a short amount of time than Afghanistan. VDEM ranks it number 176th, the 4th worst in the world. The Taliban retook control in a lightning offensive 4 years ago and haven't looked back. Most countries don't recognize the Taliban's Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. The current supreme leader is this man, Hibatullah Akhundzada. He's been the leader of the Taliban since May 25, 2016, when his predecessor was killed in an American drone strike. Akhundzada has survived at least 3 assassination attempts. He's resilient, if nothing else. But those attempts are probably why he doesn't ever appear in public. Even the lone photo that people think is his might not be. And from his hidden sanctum, he writes words that are law. There's no legislature, no elections, no courts to check his commands. Here's what is known. The Taliban's dismal human rights record needs no explaining, and he intends to keep it that way. In 2022, he said he would rather see Afghanistan suffer a nuclear strike rather than take any step that is against Islam or Sharia. Seems a bit extreme. Women have the worst of it, but the men of Afghanistan are also subject to some harsh restrictions. They're required to cover their faces with long beards. Men are also now forbidden from playing chess. The supreme leader thinks it promotes gambling. But Akhundzada may be less secure than other leaders on this list. Even inside the Taliban, his one-man rule is grating. Deputy Sirajuddin Haqqani went on camera to scold him for hoarding power. Another deputy, Abdul Salam Hanafi, even pushed for girls to return to school. When Taliban deputies sound like moderates, you know how far things have gone. The group promised not to repeat the 1990s, but here we are. Afghanistan may sit on vast mineral wealth, but the regime won't touch it. Neighbors like Pakistan and Iran worry about refugees and instability spilling over. The rest of the world, they'd rather look away. And somehow, there are still 3 countries worse, where chaos rules or resistance doesn't stand a chance. Number 3. Shattered miracle. It took foreign intervention to first bring something like democracy to Afghanistan, but in Myanmar, it looked like a miracle could happen on its own. It was under military rule from 1962 to 2011, but under the weight of crippling sanctions, it began to democratize in the 2010s. The opposition leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, won a historic election in 2015 by a landslide. But the military still retained a lot of power and didn't like what it was seeing. When she won again in 2020, the military had enough. It launched a coup in early 2021, and now the country's leader is this man, Min Aung Hlaing. Officially, he's the chairman of the State Security and Peace Commission of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. It's a nice Orwellian name, because it's just a military junta in the end, and it's ranked 177th on VDEM's list. The public in Myanmar strongly opposed the coup and took to the streets. Lang ordered a lethal response, and the country's been back in civil war ever since. Nothing has been off limits for Lang since. He's ordered airstrikes on civilians. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against him for his role in crimes against humanity on the country's Rohingya minority. Over 1 million of them have been driven out. Meanwhile, Aung San Suu Kyi has to serve 27 years out of a 33-year prison sentence for supposed corruption. And he's getting rich while the country stays in chaos. As head of the military, he helps himself to military-owned properties, sometimes for residence, sometimes for business. His family just happens to own the largest share in a luxury condo conveniently next to the military's Parami bus terminal in Yangon's South Okalapa township. Meanwhile, his 2 children run a sprawling business empire. It's neatly sliced into enough subdivisions that one of their companies is always the lucky winner of an exclusive contract. Funny how that works out. And all while around 82,000 people have been killed, with at least 3.2 million displaced since the civil war began. To him, it's just the price of doing business. But there's some hope for Myanmar's suffering people. Lang's junta has lost ground in the last couple of years. Maybe one day he'll need to make his business deals in exile. That's almost certainly never going to be the case here. You've probably been waiting for it, and at last, we've arrived in the Hermit Kingdom. Number 2. North Korea. Officially, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is the standard when it comes to measuring how bad a dictatorship can get. It's ranked 178th on VDEM's list, partially because of how experienced its regime is at being non-democratic. Kim Jong-un is the 3rd-generation dictator here, and he has a lot of titles to prove it. We can't even begin to list them all, but the most important ones are General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea and Chairman of the Central Military Commission of the Workers' Party of Korea. Then there's President of the State Affairs of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. That's a mouthful, ain't it? You already know how bad the human rights situation is in North Korea, so we don't need to repeat the general details. We're gonna talk about some of the more absurd things you might not know. Remember when Dennis Rodman sang Happy Birthday to Kim Jong-un back in 2014? He didn't say Dear Kim, he said Dear Marshall. That's because people must call him by an acceptable title whenever they refer to him, even indirectly, and that's one of them. Others at least once included Supreme Leader or Dear Respected. More recently, younger North Koreans have a new title they must refer to him by, Respected Father. But simply calling Kim Jong-un by a title isn't enough. Have you ever seen those pins bearing the faces of Kim's father and grandfather on them? North Koreans have to wear them, and they also have to not call them pins, because that's considered too humble. Badge is the correct term. Technically, North Korea has elections, which is why it's 178th. They have close to 100% turnout too, but they're not for Kim. They're for the show legislature called the Supreme People's Assembly. The people are expected to show up early, receive a paper with a single name on it, and put it in the ballot box. Then they join the cheering groups on the street when they're done, showing how happy they were to vote for such wise leadership. Sure, there's a private voting booth, but using it is basically an admission of guilt. Technically, you can cross the single name off the ballot too, but that usually comes with a police visit and an official diagnosis of insanity. Elections aren't elections here. They're loyalty tests. Fail and you pay the price, and so does your family. And finally, number 1, the least democratic country. If you consult the VDEM index, you'll find one country with the overall lowest score at 179th. Welcome to the state of Eritrea. It gained its formal independence from Ethiopia in 1993 after a 30-year war. And what happens in wars of independence? The winning leader usually takes over. That would be this man, President Isaias Afwerki. He's been the country's leader since 1993, but there's a catch. As you've seen, other dictatorships have pretend elections to at least make it look like they're democracies, even North Korea. It helps them in the international propaganda war. Eritrea doesn't bother. There was an election scheduled once, for 2001, it still hasn't happened. There was a border war with Ethiopia between 1998 and 2000 that seems to have left a permanent mark on Afwerki. He abruptly turned totalitarian and shut down all dissent. Afwerki presides over an Eritrea that has one of the worst human rights records in the world, if not the single worst. A UN report mentioned that over 400,000 people in the country had been forced into labor in the army or bureaucracy. There's no domestic media to report any of this. It's all run by the state. Reporters Without Borders ranks it 180th out of 180 countries in terms of press freedom, a spot lower than North Korea. This little country with a population between 3.5 and 6.4 million people, no one really knows, Eritrea doesn't do censuses, sent more journalists to prison than any other country. Well, except for Turkey, China, and Egypt. But not all prisons are the same. If you think El Salvador's prisons were bad, they can't even compare to here. Prisoners in Eritrea are held in remote, underground facilities where they're shoved into metal containers that double as ovens in the Horn of Africa heat. Arbitrary arrests are routine, especially since there's money to be made in denouncing someone. And, as in North Korea, families of dissidents share the punishment. In Eritrea, guilt may not be inherited, but the bill certainly is. And also, like in North Korea, Eritrea's people live in extreme poverty. Only 5.6% of them even had a cell phone in 2018. The last IMF report about its GDP said it was about $2 billion total. GDP per capita, about $580 a year. Ironically, Afwerki's party is called the People's Front for Democracy and Justice. It's not going anywhere soon, because it's the only legal party. Foreign intervention? Most foreigners probably don't even know their country exists. Even North Koreans have at least that much. So, there you have it. The 15 worst places for democracy. Which one shocked you the most? Or are they all competing for last place? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack.